Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. We're continuing to recap the lessons learned in leadership, 2 at a time, from my last series, Lessons Learned in Leadership. Since that series started well over 7 months ago, I wanted to go back over the lessons in a Reader's Digest fashion and bring back the highlights for you to keep those lessons fresh in your mind. So this week, we're rewinding the clock again, and we're going to go back to February of this year to talk about the highlights from lessons 19 and 20. But before we jump into that, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Greg Storch, owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide bartered coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. And as a friendly reminder, you can find all of my video resources on my website at lion-enterprise.com. Just look for the Lion's Pride Library and check them all out. Okay, it's time to get started with the recap of lesson number 19, and I called that one, How to Get to the Top Without Being Lonely. Now, this lesson hit a little close to home for me because for years I subscribed to the belief that being a leader meant isolating myself and that I had to be lonely at the top. Making that climb to the top as a leader doesn't have to be lonely. As a matter of fact, it shouldn't be. So during that lesson learned, I spoke to others about the difference between being a climber and being a connector. I also shed some light on why it's important to be both things as a leader. You know, when I took this new job, I ordered a quote to hang on my wall in my office. It's one of my all-time favorite quotes from Theodore Roosevelt, and it goes like this: "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." Now, I love that quote because I do believe that leadership is as much about relationships as it is about position. The thing is, a lot of people are so busy trying to work their way to the top that they forget the importance of connecting with others along the way. And that's why I shared this lesson learned during that episode of the Weekly Roar. Leaders see things before others do. And that's true when it comes to opportunities as well. There isn't anything wrong with making that climb to the top. The question becomes not whether you should try to get to the top, but rather how you should get there. You can choose to climb over everyone else to make your way to the top, or you can take others along with you. Now, should we choose to climb over those in our way, those other people will just try to pull us back down, and we won't have any allegiance in our leadership role when it comes to reaching the top. And what that creates is a bunch of followers who are only following us because of our position. Now, I talked about the difference in mindset that day, and I said that leaders who make the climb to the top at the expense of others, well, they typically foster a scarcity mindset. Now, I'll remind you what that is. It's a belief that there isn't enough out there for everyone to have it, so we have to get ours before someone else takes it. That could be coaching clients, money, whatever it is. And then I also shared that leaders who assist others on the climb typically foster an abundance mindset. Now, fostering an abundance mindset is what helps us remove the fear and allows us to operate under the belief that there's plenty to go around. Leaders who foster an abundance mindset, they don't mind assisting others to make the climb with them because they aren't viewed as competition. Now, with that said, I told people in the lion's den that day that they could either be a climber or a connector. And then I spent some time speaking about the differences between the two. Now, that first difference I shared that day between climbers and connectors was the way they think. I told you that climbers tend to think vertically, while connectors think more horizontally. Now, a person who tends to be a climber is fully aware of who's ahead of them and who's behind them, especially in terms of the organizational chart. They watch their performance numbers closely and compare them to their peers. Moving forward is what's important, and anything else can be devastating to their ego. But connectors, well, they think in terms of sliding over where others are at. They tend to focus more about who is on the journey with them and how they can come alongside them to help. Then the second difference between climbers and connectors was in their focus. Climbers spend most of their time thinking about moving up and ahead, so they stay focused on their own position, while connectors, they stay focused on their relationships. If you remembered this one, then you'll remember that I said it was like the difference between ladders and bridges. See, ladders only get us from the bottom to the top in a vertical climb, but bridges, they let us travel in both directions, allowing us to move horizontally to meet others on their climb. And then that third difference was this. When it comes to climbers and connectors, there's a big difference in what they value. Of course, climbers, well, they value competition. They see everything through a competition lens, and when they can only see things from that perspective, it can make them take actions that will get them to the top at all costs. Connectors, well, they value cooperation. Connectors are more interested in using their relationships with others in order to foster a sense of cooperation. Those are the people who are always seeking the win-win. Then I went on to share the fourth difference between a climber and a connector, and that was in what they seek. You can probably figure out that climbers seek power, while connectors, well, they seek relationships. The climber's mindset is to always win, and that leads to a natural desire for power. It's what helps them move faster to reach the top quicker than everyone else. If you really want to achieve something significant, you'll need the help of others. You'll need a highly functioning team to do it. One of the ways to develop a team like that is to form partnerships, and that's exactly what connectors thrive on. Then the fifth difference was a big one between climbers and connectors, and that was where they stand. Climbers naturally like to stand apart, while connectors migrate towards standing together. The example I used for this last one was the Olympic runners in the 880. That's 2 laps around the track. Just like climbers, the runner spends the first lap maintaining the lead position and stays out in front. But then on the second lap, their focus shifts to creating separation from everyone else behind them. Now, connectors, on the other hand, they spend their time and focus their energy on getting closer to people. One of the ways they do that is they find common ground with them. And once they do, they all find a place where they can stand together. So those were the 5 main differences I shared that day between climbers and connectors. I also reminded the others that, as with everything in life, it's not good to be all of one thing or all of another. We should really strive to blend the two together. Leaders are ones who know the way, go the way, and show the way. But in order for us to be able to do those three things, we have to be both a climber and a connector. So I just wanted you to think about where you stand. Maybe you lean more towards being a climber, or maybe you're leaning more towards being a connector. Well, what I found was where you stand on the spectrum tends to also be directly proportional to age. Yeah, the younger we are, the more we show up as a climber. And the older we become, the more we find ourselves as connectors. Now, a lot of those who find themselves staying in the climber spectrum tend to be challenged in the area of relationships. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest problems professionals have with achieving career success is not from a lack of competence, but you guessed it, their inability to foster relationships. So when you make the climb without making connections, you'll gain authority, no doubt, but you won't gain many friends. The ultimate goal, the perfect balance, is to make friends and gain authority. So if you think you're on the climber side of the spectrum and need to shift more towards the connector side, you may want to slow your climb and focus on relationship building along the way. On the other hand, if you're connecting well with others, but your desire to climb isn't as strong as it could be, you might end up with a lot of friends as a leader, but not much authority to get anything done. If that's you, then what you can do to strike a better balance is to increase your energy so that you can intensify your sense of purpose and urgency. The most effective leaders are those who can find a way and put forth the necessary actions to balance both connecting and climbing. At the end of the day, being at the top is only temporary. We can't stay there forever. But the thing that will always remain, despite the change in our circumstances, are relationships. If you take a connector's approach to your leadership, whether that's in the C-suite or in the home office with your family, you give yourself a much better chance at success. And if I've said this once, I've said it a million times already, and that is that nobody has ever achieved anything of significance without the help of others. Even if you end up not succeeding in something you've taken on, if you do it the right way, if you attempt that climb as a connector, the worst that can happen is that you'll end up making friends along the way. Now, that brings me to the recap of another one of my favorite lessons learned in leadership, and I called lesson number 20, Your Choice is a Superpower. Coach John Wooden once said, the choice you make makes you. We're constantly facing decision points throughout our entire lives, and when they occur, we're faced with making a choice. The thing is, we may not always get what we want, but we will always get what we choose. See, the truth is that when you tell yourself that you don't have a choice, you're really removing the option of having one. You spend time convincing yourself that what you're facing is the only option you have, and that removes the ability to consider any other alternatives. Choices, without question, are the biggest determining factor on how our lives turn out. Now, that led me to share my story about how I ended up living in Italy. That was all about choices. My wife and I wanted to live overseas again, and when we were faced with the choice of moving to Italy or remaining in Virginia, the choice we made changed our lives. Leaders are forced to make choices all the time. I know I've made thousands of them myself. That's something all leaders have in common. And so during that lesson, I mentioned that there were two things that hold true when it comes to making choices. The first thing was that the choices we make, the really tough ones, always have a way of showing us to ourselves. And the second thing I found that holds true about the choices we make was that once the choice has been made, it changes who we are. A former mentor of mine and one of my all-time favorite motivational speakers, Zig Ziglar, was quoted as saying, "Every choice you make has an end result." Anyone who makes a choice should understand that once the choice has been made, you have to deal with the consequences of that choice, good or bad. And that has a great impact on us. Every time we make a choice, we change just a little bit. And the sum of our choices is what creates who we are. And that's why it's important that we choose what we choose wisely. So during that weekly roar, I shared 3 critical choices that we can make as leaders and as human beings that help to make us better in both of those areas. So here they are for you one more time. Now, that first critical choice was to choose a higher standard. Good leaders and good people always hold themselves to a higher standard than what others expect of them. Now, my advice that day was to never get comfortable with your level of performance. Continually push yourself to reach your potential and always hold a higher standard for yourself than others may hold for you. I shared a quote from the legendary basketball coach, John Wooden, who said, "Never try to be better than others, but be the best you can be." Never dumb down who you are to meet someone else's low expectations. Be true to who you are and strive to always exceed expectations. Remember, under promise and over deliver. Now, the second critical choice I shared that day that helps us to become better leaders and better people was choosing to help others. When it comes to leadership, sometimes we have to tell people what they don't want to hear, even though it's helpful to them in the long run. You see, helping people is not the same as pleasing them all the time. Sometimes the people we lead want what they don't need and need what they don't want. Sometimes we have to deliver a message that isn't what they want to hear, but it's what they need to hear. Helping people is more important than making them happy. Believe me, there will be plenty of time we make people unhappy as a result of fulfilling our responsibilities as a leader. We don't always get to make the popular choices that result in everyone being happy. At the end of the day, we should strive to ensure we give everyone our best effort, even though we're bound to make someone unhappy. Remember, we're going to have critics and we're going to be misunderstood. But when we focus on helping people instead of trying to always make them happy, the choice to lead gets easier. And then that brought me to the third and final critical choice that helps us to become better leaders and better people. And that was choosing to focus on the present. You know, there's a reason why the windshield in our cars is larger than the rear view mirror. It's so we can spend time clearly seeing what lies ahead of us instead of staying focused on what lies behind. Now, a lot of people struggle with letting go of opportunities they've missed out on. That just leads to regret, and they get stuck focusing on the part of their lives that might have been. And then they are stuck just shooting all over themselves. I should have done this and I should have done that. If you want to stay focused on the present, remember this one simple phrase. Ready? Yesterday ended last night. The only thing we control is what we choose to do right now. The longer we focus on yesterday, the more we lose sight of today's opportunities. You know, I heard someone say one time that opportunities never looked as good coming as they do going. Well, if you stay focused in the wrong place, you'll miss every opportunity that comes along. While they come from all different directions, opportunities can only be taken when we're in the present. Remember, new beginnings can only come from old endings. So, those were the three really critical choices we can make that can change our trajectory as leaders and as human beings. Making a choice to hold ourselves to a higher standard, choosing to help others, and choosing to focus on the present. Whatever you did after that weekly roar, I hope you chose to follow this advice. See what I did there? Look, at the end of the day, there's one thing I know to be absolutely true, and that is the choices we make truly do make us. Every choice we make has the power to change who we are, for better or worse. So remember this as I wrap up the recap on this lesson learned. To be a successful leader, you have to know what you stand for. You have to know what you're willing to stand up to. The key choices we make when it comes to our behaviors and how we'll lead others is not only an indicator of the kind of leader we are, but it also determines the type of leaders and people we will become. The choices we make tell others who we really are, and they'll continue to create the person we become, for better or for worse. And that's why I believe that choice is our greatest superpower. All right, that does it for this week's recap of another 2 lessons learned in leadership: how we get to the top without being lonely, and how the gift of choice can be our superpower. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you want to keep running to the roar, then join me next week as I continue these micro lessons in review and recap the 21st and 22nd lesson learned in leadership. All you have to do is just come on back to the Lion's Den next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much for supporting me and watching the Weekly Roar today. I appreciate you. And until we meet again next Wednesday, remember, be powerful, but stay poised, just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.